question there. But welcome, welcome. I'm Jeremy Fricke. I'm Education Director at Tri-Faith Initiative, and I'm here today with Needelman. I'm going to share my screen really quick so we can kind of discuss a couple of the ground rules and goals of this program. So Making the Familiar Strange really has two core goals. It's to study Abrahamic scriptural stories alongside each other and to encourage perspective taking by looking at these stories from new points of view. Sometimes the stories will be really familiar and we'll look at them sort of with new eyes, and sometimes the stories will be less familiar and we'll be looking more for those overlaps of core values or something like that. Just some ground rules here. We'll have some discussion today. Please try to be as respectful as possible and think about your own assumptions when you're talking about religion. And speak from your own point of view. An example of this would be, in my experience, or, as in my own life, or, I feel this way. Use those I words in particular rather than trying to represent an entire community. And for the purposes of this program, there is no wrong answer. It's all about, trying to see these stories from new points of view. And we'll learn a lot today from Lee and from each other, both kind of from a teaching and discussion perspective. A couple of announcements. The next Making the Familiar Strange is not confirmed yet, but it will be the third Tuesday next month also. And we'll get an invitation out to everybody who registered for today's program. But we do have April's confirmed, which will be Rebecca Morello from Countryside Community Church, and she'll be talking about Bathsheba. All right. So I'm just going to kind of hand it off to Lee Needelman, who will kind of help guide us today, both with the story and a little bit of the discussion.
Hi, I'm Lee Needelman, and this story, the telling of this story, is dedicated to my mother-in-law, Millie Needelman, who is pictured here with her husband, Joey. Millie Needelman, may her memory be a blessing. All right. I think when you leave today, I hope you'll remember some of Ruth's story. She was one of few women who have a book in the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, titled after her. What did she do to get this honor? One, she represents the Jewish value of hesed, or kindness. And two, she achieved redemption through her relationships with others. Three, she is famous as the representative of a convert to Judaism. Her fame as a convert is what probably got me to immediately choose the book of Ruth when asked to present a book or story from the Bible to a Tri-Faith audience. I have no desire to proselytize. This is a story of conversion, a concept that all of our religions experience. The words she spoke for her own acceptance of Judaism.
Lee,
yeah?
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but a few people are having a little hard time hearing. So I think we need to ask you to come a little closer to your microphone. Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt.
I'll see if I can turn up my volume a little bit too. All right, you're going to get a big face then, Why I chose this is because of her particular relationship to conversion as a role model. And the thing she said is a part of our conversion ceremonies in Judaism today. Can you hear me better now?
If you could just try to speak up a little more, I think it's close.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, that's okay. Tell me again if you need to. For me, this idea is deeply personal. I remember speaking Ruth's words at my own conversion to Judaism. On December 26, 1997, the day after Christmas, the fourth night of Hanukkah, on a Friday Shabbat night, immediately after services, I formally converted to Judaism before my Jewish community. Rabbi Azrael led my conversion ceremony. It came time for me to read Ruth's words, understood to be the words of someone who has embraced Judaism. I was handed the Torah scroll to hold. I hugged it to my body. It was heavy and as big as my torso and awkward to hold on to. I was warm in my winter clothes. The Torah scroll was dressed in a warm needlepoint cover with heavy silver appointments. I stood holding the Torah before my congregation, saying Ruth's words. And these are the words: entreat me not to leave you or to return from following after you, for wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. As I read, I was distracted, hugging the Torah close to my body. I could feel my heart beating. It felt to me that my heart was beating inside the Torah. I will never forget that moment. In your tradition, are there important conversion narratives? Do you have words traditionally said or familiar traditions in a conversion ceremony for your religion or special memory to share?
That was a beautiful story, Lee. Um,
Thank you.
I think we all, all traditions or most traditions have, there's an important process of joining the community. And while, we're certainly not talking about proselytizing or anything like that, it's a shared experience. And if anybody would like to talk about, those narratives within their scriptures or anything like that, this is a great time to share, so that we understand each other better. And the other piece is that we can definitely return to some of this a little later in the conversation too, especially after hearing a little bit more about Ruth. But if anybody would like to add right now, this is a good time.
In the Christian tradition, if I may, hi. The most famous is probably the conversion of Saul of Tarsus, which is a very dramatic conversion, and of course he was Jewish. And it's probably the most dramatic conversion I can think of in Christianity. Recorded in the Christian scriptures. But I can think of more private conversions that are very important in Christianity. John Newton, who wrote the famous song Amazing Grace. I mean, he was a slave trader. And that's in the Protestant side of Christianity. And it speaks to personal redemption and turning over a new leaf and changing a life entirely. And I think I'm an ordained interfaith minister. So I grew up Catholic in a Jewish neighborhood. I identify spiritually very much as Jewish. I serve a congregation and live in an area that's primarily Christian, but very ecumenical. And I think that there are other, and throughout other religious traditions, we have that. But certainly in the Christian tradition, I think we'd look to who the Christians call Paul.
And thank you. And Amanda, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to say similarly to Lee, I also converted, and part of that ceremony of receiving the Torah for that first time and saying the Shema, I think those are the words that got me the most, was like, because it's telling you, hey, you're now part of the people of Israel and you're leading us in the Shema, right? That was such a powerful experience for me. That you holding that Torah so close to you that you do feel that going through your body. So yeah, I share that as well.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Maureen. Anyone else?
Well, there will be more opportunities to share as we go and talk as well. I will stop sharing for a moment here and let Lee kind of start the start the story of Ruth.
Yeah, so what is Ruth's story? Those of you who had a chance to read this book will notice some embellishments or special details they do not remember from the Bible story. These come from the Midrash Jews love and sharing stories, so much so that they envision the words moving apart so they can introduce new words, Midrash, to further the meaning of the text. I've added some traditional Midrash about Ruth to this storytelling of Ruth. Please feel free to ask questions or to share your thoughts as we remember this story. As is in tradition, I will recite the blessing before reading Torah. Join me if you know it. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedishanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, eternal our God, sovereign of the world, who has sanctified us with your commandments and has commanded us to engage in the words of Torah. Do you also recite blessings before studying your holy books?
Yes, we do. In Islam, we do. So I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes,
we always begin in the name of God, the most merciful, the most beneficent, whenever we open anything in our religion.
that's wonderful. Just doing this together helps us learn so much. Thank
you.
You're
welcome.
Anyone else? Are there traditional Christian blessings as part of study or reading the Bible?
You know, when texts are read formally in services, there are always words of invocation spoken before, but they're not, for us in our Protestant tradition, they are not formulaic. They are not necessarily the same phrase over and over again. Mm-hmm. Let you who have ears to hear and eyes to see ready yourselves, or, you know, and it can be different every week or every service.
Very.
I think it differs in private prayer. Christianity differs from the other two Abrahamic faiths in that I can't think of any mandatory opening or any tradition that prior to prayer, reading Holy Scripture, that there is a prelude to that, you know, as there is in Judaism and Islam.
And in many Christian traditions, they will at the end say, this is the word of God for the people of God, and the people respond, thanks be to God, which kind of is at the end instead of at the beginning.
Some Christians might make the sign of the cross. I think that would be the Eastern tradition, or actually, Eastern Orthodoxy. I think that before they begin, they do that.
Carrie has her hand raised. I think she's muted though.
Carrie.
Yeah, in the Catholic tradition, when it's public prayer and when it's the reading of the gospel, the sign of the cross is made along with the presider who's reading it. And roughly spoken, we say, may the Lord be with us in our mind. Oh, it's not the sign of the cross, in our minds, in our lips, and in our hearts as we listen to the gospel. But for private prayer, other than if you make the sign of the cross, there's not really anything formalized I know of before reading scripture.
That's beautiful, Carrie. Thank you. Bonnie?
Hi, Lee. Hi. I'm so proud of you. Oh. So we heard you recite the Hebrew, and then you translated into English. And then we're told that there are Muslim prayers that are offered before a prayer. But what is that? Can we hear that? Can we hear it? Can we hear what that Muslim prayer is?
In Arabic, we say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. It basically means I begin with in the name of Allah, the name of God, the most merciful, the most beneficent. So even when we eat, we say that. And when we get into the car, we say that. When we begin anything, is something what we say. We always begin in the name of Allah, name of God. Yeah.
That's beautiful. You are giving me goosebumps, all of you. I feel like this telling of the book of Ruth is triply blessed and more by all of your sharing your blessings. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to begin telling you the story of Ruth now. The book of Ruth begins by telling us there is a famine in the land. It was time to leave. Elimelech was a wealthy man, but he did not help his nation in need. Instead, he and his wife Naomi together leave Bethlehem of Judah to go to Moab with their sons Machlon and Kilion. Elimelech dies, and Naomi is left alone with her two sons, who marry Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. They lived there 10 years. Machlon and Kilion also died. Machlon's name meant illness, and Kilion's name meant destruction. Reading the Bible in translation, Rabbi Azrael says, is like kissing a bride through the veil, because we would not know that those names meant that. So I just wanted you to think about that even the names mean things. Can you all hear me pretty well now?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Naomi hears that the Lord has given food to the land of Judah and decides to return to her home country with her daughters-in-law. The daughters-in-law were both daughters of Eglon, the king of Moab. They left a royal house and the status of princesses to connect with devotion to this Jewish family, its values and practices. On the road, Naomi thanks her daughters-in-law for being good to the dead and to her. She says that they should return to their mother's house to have their best chance of a future. At Naomi's urging, Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye and returned to Moab. Ruth, however, clings to Naomi, saying those famous words I repeated in my own conversion story. She will not leave her mother-in-law. Those words, Ruth says, are here on the screenshot you see of the dramatic William Blake painting of the daughters-in-law separating as the story takes a turn. Would someone like to read these words to us? For us? Do we have a volunteer?
Yeah, who would like to volunteer?
Ashley?
Sure, and I'm just reading the purple area, correct?
Yes, that would be
Okay.
great. This is what Ruth says to Naomi.
Entreat me not to leave you or to return from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus and more may the Lord do to me if anything but death parts me from you.
Thank you. That was beautifully said.
Thank you very much, Ashley. Thank you. Ruth wants Naomi not to be alone. She sees Naomi's words meant only as a necessary discouragement to one who wishes to convert to Judaism to make sure their intentions are pure. Ruth leaves her own wealth and comforts behind to care for a lonely, aging woman with only spiritual benefits to gain. They go on together to Bethlehem. I think we could turn off this screenshot. Thank you. When they get there, there is much excitement. Women are delighted to see their old friend Naomi. Naomi says, though, not to call her Naomi, which means pleasantness, but to call her Marah, meaning bitterness. She says, I went out full, and the Lord brought me home again empty. There was a crowd in Bethlehem. The whole city had gathered to attend the funeral of the wife of Boaz, the leader and judge of the generation. Now, I've got an aside here. Have you noticed the differences in the story I am telling than the story you read? If anyone's noticed some differences, which would be the added midrash, share with us what you might have noticed that's different from the book. Tom?
Well, Orpah and Ruth are presented as princesses, daughters of the king. I'm not even sure they're siblings. The text doesn't indicate that. And Boaz's wife here, introducing at the beginning of the second chapter, the text says he was a prominent man, but it doesn't indicate that he was a widower. It certainly makes sense that he would be a widower, but again, it isn't explicit in the text. But it does make the story a little more, it flows a little more fluidly. That that in Bethlehem they're buzzing like a beehive, not only because Naomi has returned, but also because Boaz's wife has died.
Excellent, Tom. You really are paying attention. And that's what I've done with the rest of the story too. You will see more additions. And I'll be curious to hear what you think about them, what Midrash does to a story. Does anyone have an opinion about what this Midrash so far has done for the story?
Well, it makes Ruth's actions far more sacrificial and giving and thoughtful and kind toward her mother-in-law, to go from what is implied as wealth to what will be shown as poverty. But yeah, that was new to me.
Very true. It just helps you think, I think, a little bit differently about the story and adds a new depth to it. That's why I love it so much. All right, I will move on to like the chapter 2 of the book of Ruth. It ends up that this Boaz is a kinsman of Naomi's husband, Elimelech. This is important in that a kinsman, a relative, is obligated to marry the widow of his kin to keep the land in the family and to keep the family name for any children. This is the concept of the redeeming kinsman. I have a question for you. What does redeeming or redemption mean? That's a hard question, so I'm going to, and we're not going to leave you too long. We do have.
I understand it as a redeeming of the legacy that would be there if there were an heir from the woman's original husband.
This is true. It means the heir can keep the name of the husband alive.
Almost paying off a loss. Is that kind of what you were saying?
Pardon?
Almost like, sorry, I was just to follow up with Carrie. So you're kind of talking about paying off the loss of what could have been, in a sense.
Carrie, you're muted.
Yeah, I hadn't really tried to get as literal with the term redeem as a loss, but more, yeah, I guess that you just verbalized it better. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Marilyn, did you have a comment?
Well, I think redeem means, for me, to make whole again. And it seems to me that that was part of how they kept families going, how they kept society going, how they took care of widows and so forth in those days. That's how I've always understood it. A societal way that they managed things in those days.
I see an addition of forgiveness, a measure of forgiveness and redemption for past sins.
It's lovely. We get into different depths in a group like this, and I so appreciate it. I love hearing your thoughts. Anyone else?
Yeah, this is Sandy. For me, when I read it, it had to do with Ruth returning to her own people, to her own cultural, foundation. I guess that's kind of the way I see this a little bit, about the fact that she's returning to her people and therefore a support system for her faith. So that's the way I kind of see it.
I think we're getting lovely midrash from this group today, and I appreciate it so much. Any other comments on this?
Well, I think the significance is Ruth is returning to a foreign land. It's Naomi who's returning to her native land, but Ruth's the one taking the extraordinary step of clinging to her mother-in-law and taking the chance of becoming, a young widow in an exotic foreign culture, where without the redemption, she'd be very vulnerable.
This is very true. Very true. Well, any other comments?
I know for me, just that bit there that I read reads like poetry to me. Like, I think this is one of the most beautiful declarations of love and like admiration and respect in the Bible, one of them. And I think it's absolutely honorable. And I love that. Oh, Deborah says she likes that too.
Thank you. Thank you. I will continue with the story. Ruth gets permission from Naomi to glean ears of grain in the field behind the reapers. It is obligatory charity that field owners leave grain for the poor. Ruth hopes to find someone kind and willing to let her glean as she humbly submits to her new station in life. Have you heard of the tradition of leaving the corners of the field for the poor and needy? Does your tradition have expectations to care for others like this?
My name is Sandy. I'm from the Christian tradition, but Leonard Cohen wrote beautiful poetry, and he talks about that, about the corners of the poor in one of his writings. And he's sitting on the edge of his sister's property in like this camper. She has this big, beautiful home, and he starts to feel, kind of less than, because he doesn't have all these beautiful things. And so he realizes she has her part in the world, and he has his, and he mentions how he does spontaneous charities in the corners of the poor. And that was my first coming across. And so then, of course, I went to Leviticus and read that, and it's very powerful stuff, or very powerful.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I know we have tzedakah in Judaism, and there's similar things in other religions of giving of monies, for the poor. And I think they may spring from this, leaving the corners of the field. I'm going to move on with this story. And we can come back to this if you want to, or you can leave comments in the chat anytime or questions. Divine guidance leads Ruth to the field belonging to Boaz, known as the greatest sage in his generation. Boaz asks his servant, who was appointed over the reapers, "Whose girl is that?" He answered, "She is a Moabite girl who came back with Naomi out of the fields of Moab." Boaz then says to Ruth, "Hear me, my daughter. So do not go to glean in another field, and do not go away from here, but stay close to my maidens." He addresses her with the endearment, "my daughter," and tells her that her wonderful kindness to her mother-in-law will reward her in heaven. Jeremy, did you want to put up your question?
Okay, let's see that. I think one question I had just reading through the story is, would Ruth be nervous about gleaning this grain? She's coming from a certain background, and among folks she's not as connected with.
But Naomi already told her to do this, and she trusts Naomi.
That's true too.
Very true. If you go ahead, Marilyn. You need to unmute yourself, Marilyn.
There's the threat, though, in the text about watch out for those other men, stay in my field and so forth. So I'm assuming that just as still exists today, women do have to be careful sometimes about going out and being different, being in a situation they haven't been in before, not understanding all the rules perhaps, and being subject to attack from those who don't really maybe want them there or feel that they don't have a right to be there.
It's like there's no change under the sun. Is that Ecclesiastes? Excellent. Thank you for reminding us of that part of the story. I think we'll move on. But Boaz doesn't seem to get the message and realize that he, as a redeeming kinsman, should take these women into his care. Nor does he ask how Naomi was doing after 10 years in Moab, or about the fate of his uncle Elimelech and his cousins Machlon and Kilion. Ruth doesn't have any better expectations. She, who was a Moabite princess, now falls on her face, bowing low in immense gratitude, asking, "Why have I found grace in your sight for you to take notice of me when I am only an alien, a foreigner?" She is so humble and modest that she doesn't even realize her rights. She is full of positivity and able to see the good in others and in life. Ruth said, "Let me find grace in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me." I think you might have caught some midrash in there. Does anything stand out?
I mean, I firstly want to compliment that I think you've interwoven them very well. You know, if I'm not really well read on it, then I wouldn't notice, just saying, which is a good thing.
Thank you. I think it's very exciting and adds a dimension that does not hurt for us to understand. And I think with these last comments, I will go on to my next question, because you hear how Ruth is modest and unassuming. And I have a question for you about her. Does she show strength or weakness in the way she's responding? Marilyn, did you have a thought? I saw your hand come up.
Yes, I think she's cunning. She knows that she does have to be modest before this man. Naomi has already told her who he is, and I think she sees that as a way for them to survive in society and be better off if she is modest and humble before him.
Any other comments about Ruth's strengths or weaknesses?
Hi, Lee, I got one. I'm
Okay.
driving, actually. Can you hear me?
I can, Abdul. Be careful. Pull over.
Oh, I'm fine. First of all, this is really great. So I'm learning a lot. And also, too, you know, I really enjoy the similarities. You know, when you had, you know, asked the question, you know, about, you know, charities and good works, and you brought up sadaqah. We also have sadaqah in Islam, and it means the same thing. You know, charity, and also too, we also have hasana, which means good works and good deeds. So, you know, it is incumbent upon us all to do, you know, charitable works, you know, on the down low, of course, or hit the count, you know. But, you know, in terms of, is she showing, you know, strength or weakness? Obviously, you know, anytime, you know, you do what is, you know, right and what is good, that's always a sign of strength. So, but that's my thoughts, and I love how you are, you know, teaching us. I mean, this is really good. So great job, Lee, and I'll take any class with you anytime.
Thanks, Abdul. I'm a fan of yours too. And we'll move on. Boaz offers Ruth bread and roasted grain, She had her fill, with even some left over. He makes sure she gets extra stalks of grain to glean. He tells his young men not to rebuke her. When Ruth returned home, Naomi noticed the special and generous attention that she had received, asking where Ruth had gleaned. Ruth tells her the man she worked with was Boaz, and Naomi said to her, "This man is closely related to us. He is one of our redeeming kinsmen." Now we go to chapter 3 in the book of Ruth. Naomi has a plan for redemption. Naomi decides not to wait any longer for Boaz to come forward to help with his responsibility to Ruth. She decides to help matters along with a more proactive plan. That's the original text. I think I'm going to go ahead and read this text, and if you can read two things at once, you can read that while I read this, or you could listen, or you could just read that. So I'm going to go ahead and read my text. Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to Ruth, "My daughter, I would like you to have a better future. Now, Boaz, with whose maidens you have been, is our next of kin. He will be winnowing barley tonight on the threshing floor. Therefore, bathe, anoint yourself, and dress up. Put on your cloak and go down to the threshing floor. Do not show yourself until he has finished eating and drinking. Then when he lies down, take note of the place where he lies, and go, uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do." And she said to her, Ruth said, "I will do what you have said to me." This is such an audacious and even dangerous plan. This takes risks. It shows human initiative. That's my aside. She went down to the threshing floor and did exactly what her mother-in-law had told her to do. Boaz ate and drank, and his heart was merry. He went to lie down beside the grain pile, and she came softly and uncovered his feet. Now, I have to tell you that this is a euphemism for genitals, and it's a little embarrassing, but commentary tells us this as well. So she lays down, and in the middle of the night, the man was startled and turned over. A woman was lying at his feet, and he said to her, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your handmaiden. Spread your robe over your handmaiden, for you are our next of kin, a redeemer." Spreading the robe also has the possibility of another answer, suggesting lying together. Well, surprisingly, only now does Boaz realize that he should have initiated this union and that his prior passivity had caused Ruth torment and shame. He said, "The Lord bless you, my daughter. Your latest act of kindness is even greater than the first, in that you have not gone after younger men, whether poor or rich." Now, is it true that I am next of kin? There is a kinsman even closer than I. Stay the night. In the morning, if he will redeem you, fine, let him redeem. But if he does not want to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I shall redeem you. Now lay down until the morning. And she lay at his feet until the morning. Then, before a person could recognize another, she rose. For he said, "Let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor." Ruth came to her mother-in-law, and Naomi asked, "How are things, my daughter?" And she told her all the man had done for her. Then Naomi said, "Wait, my daughter, until you know how the matter will turn out. The man will not rest. He will surely settle the matter today." Now we enter book 4.
Here, let's pause 1 second.
Okay.
So I noticed Carrie made a comment about the foot thing. I just wanted to hear that addition to the kind of collection of how this story goes.
And I'm sorry, I don't recall the exact details, but again, Robert Alter has a wonderful edition of the Jewish Bible. You may be familiar with it, and he went into some detail about why that belief was probably not correct. And I'm sorry, I don't recall the details, but I can look it up and email it to people if you would like.
No, that's great. Having a dialogue and
I'm looking for it, Carrie. I'd read the same thing and it's in front of me. The print is small. So when I find it, I'll tell you.
Thank you. I mean, this is out there somewhere in the Midrash or the study materials. So it causes you to think about the danger of her mission, really, that she's doing that. It's audacious and dangerous. And it kind of does remind you of that. And some controversy. I think we can take it. Any other comments?
This is Sandy.
Agreed.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, what really strikes me about Ruth is the fact that she defers to people who know more than she does. She doesn't have a prideful spirit. So when her mother-in-law tells her, you know, you really should be acting this way, she listens and she does it because she knows that she doesn't understand all the cultural rules, number one, but she also, I think, just has a deferential spirit. When Boaz says, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, she defers. So she has a very humble spirit too. It isn't fake humility. She actually has very genuine humility, and that's what strikes me in the story.
Excellent insight, Sandra. Anyone else?
There's a footnote, two footnotes in my Bible that apply to this. The first is uncover a place at his feet. Naomi advocates a course of action that will lead Boaz to act. Israelite custom and moral expectations strongly suggest that there is no loss of virtue involved in the scene. The next footnote is spreading the wing of your cloak. Ezekiel 16:8 makes it clear that this is a request for marriage. Ruth connects it to Redeemer responsibility. Those are the two footnotes. I'm reading from a Catholic Bible.
Thank you, Larry. I love the depth that we're getting into, and especially sharing the traditions, the different traditions. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I have something really quick.
Yes.
Sandra, I have to agree kind of with you. That's one of the things that strikes me about this part of the story. It's just like the covering that is available in obedience. You know, Ruth was, to your point, like, you know, not of the cultural norm. She doesn't know exactly what to do, but the faith that she has and the wisdom that she readily accepts and, like you said, defers to. I had laughed, you know, when I read this story before we met today, because I was like, man, had I had an auntie or something, you know, like for like, hey, Ashley, you know, do this. I mean, it was kind of comical in the sense of thinking of the times and the customs that they had back then as we read this story. But yeah, I mean, as we will see, there is definitely a gift in that obedience.
Mm-hmm. That's excellent. Beautiful, Ashley. Thank you. It's bringing to my mind how the Jews accepted the Torah. All the other nations refused the Torah, but when God came to the Jewish people asking them to accept the Torah, they said, we will do and we will hear. So they will accept the Torah before they even know what it is. And it reminds me kind of things you were saying about how Ruth would do exactly whatever her mother-in-law told her to do, and other people with humility and strength. Thank you. Well, we got book 4. Any other comments so far? All right, there's time for more. Go ahead.
I wanted to point out Carrie's comment about the savviness of Naomi also, just the almost like political intellect of sorts, you know, very smart about knowing.
Where can we sign up to get a Naomi? That's what I need.
Yeah, this is why I showed my mother-in-law at the beginning, and she was a wonderful mother-in-law as well, like Naomi. Book 4. After a short process in court where a closer relative absolves himself of the obligation to marry Ruth, Boaz publicly declares that he intends to marry Ruth and redeem their land as well. Now, for a change, I really shortened something. That's a long story if you read Ruth. And Boaz said to the elders and all the people, "You are witnesses this day that I have acquired from Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Machlon and Kilion, and further that I have myself acquired as my wife, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Machlon, to perpetuate the name of the deceased upon his estate, so that his name may not disappear among his kinsmen and from the gate of his hometown. You are witnesses today." And all the people who were there at the gate and the elders said, "We are witnesses." So Boaz married Ruth, and she was his wife. When they came together, the Lord let her conceive, and she bore a son. And the woman said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not withheld a redeemer from you today. May his name be famous in Israel. He will renew your life and sustain your old age. For he is born of your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons." Okay, this is a question I didn't even write down, but this is not common in the Bible, I think, to have a woman preferred over 7 sons. So that's my aside. Any thoughts on that?
I love it, Lee.
That it's can be so patriarchal to prefer the daughter-in-law Ruth, who loves her more than 7 sons. I do love it. I love it too, Deb. All right.
Everything in this book really emphasizes women compared to other books in the Bible.
So true. So true. And so many strengths for women. Okay, there is a picture here of the son and of Boaz and Ruth, I would say. But it could be Naomi. I think some of these words are confusing because there's the redeemer. Is the redeemer Boaz? Is the redeemer the child? Sometimes you can read that again and kind of wonder exactly. Well, Naomi took the child and laid it in her bosom and became his nurse. Some Midrash says she was able to nurse and feed this baby. And the women neighbors gave him a name, saying, "There is a son born to Naomi. They call his name Obed. He was the father of Jesse, who was the father of David." This is a book about David, who comes from the heritage of Ruth, a convert, and is the progenitor of the Messiah. Redemption. And the story of Ruth, who saves whom from what? Ruth saves Naomi from being alone. Naomi brings Ruth with her to Bethlehem. Boaz redeems both women. Ruth redeems Boaz. Ruth's child becomes the means by which Naomi reclaims her family and lineage. Is this more a story of redemption, kindness, or conversion?
All of the above.
Yeah, I agree.
That's kind of where I started and where I end.
Yeah. And can I share something that someone else said, not I, because I'm not that smart? Robert Alter also describes this whole book as the transition from emptiness to fullness, from famine to abundance, from bereavedness and childlessness to marriage and children. So I thought that was just a lovely framework for thinking about the arc of the story.
Beautiful. Yeah, something we can carry with us when we part. Any other comments at this point?
Well, I just, in the story that I read, the relative who actually had first option to lay claim, at first said, "Oh, sure, I'd like to do that," until he finds out that it comes along with this obligation to marry Ruth. And then he says, wait, that's going to kind of mess up all my son's inheritance and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, deal's off. Boaz, you can have her. And I find that interesting too, in this story. I don't I don't know, its significance really. I don't know enough about the legal laws here about who gets what when, there are marriages and all that, but I just thought that was interesting. And I'm wondering if Boaz knew that, because in my version, he tells him that. He says, oh, well, okay then, but you're going to have to marry Ruth, knowing that the guy's going to go, wait, no, that's not really what I wanted to do. So there's a lot of intricacies in this story.
Yes. In that trial where I shortened it a whole lot, and he says he's going to redeem Ruth. That's in the Hebrew Bible as well, that there was the first in line as the Redeemer who refused. And some of my commentaries suggest it might be because she is a Moabitess. So there's, some prejudice and possibly involved.
Mm-hmm.
Carrie, you have a comment?
Yeah, I just have a Ruth story to share that didn't have to do with conversion, which is why I didn't bring it up in the first place. But I was the one who chose at least some of the readings for my father's funeral. And I did the famous narrative of Ruth and Naomi for that, because even though this was a man and a woman, I just felt it's such a beautiful story of bonding of people and of taking care of each other.
I've heard some people use Ruth's quote that was up on the slide in wedding ceremonies as well.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a bit of an aftermath, because heaven knows, why should I ever stop? This is the aftermath. Boaz married Ruth and she became his wife, and God granted her a pregnancy and she bore a son. The same night in which Ruth conceived, Boaz died.
Oh,
So you got to
whoa,
keep your
that's
interest.
a little harsh.
Yeah. Well, let me go on. It might make more sense. Boaz, an 83-year-old man, fulfilled his purpose in this world by conceiving a child with Ruth and dies. She, on the other hand, became a widow again, this time of the leader of the generation, and pregnant. Her suffering is not over, but she merits having a child to raise him with Naomi, to see a future hope for her family and the continuity for Naomi's son's name. Ruth, full of kindness and generosity, even seems to be marrying Boaz for the sake of others. Ruth doesn't voice any opinions or comments until the end of the book, recording her life. And this is the comment. Ruth, the neighbors all named him, saying, Naomi has borne a son, and they called him Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Ruth and Naomi are now full-fledged members of the community, and other women share in their newfound happiness. Even here, it is obvious that Ruth has given the best years of her life to take care of Naomi, giving her a grandchild and seeing the family line continue. But Ruth's reward is still forthcoming. The text indicates the direct lineage of King David. Ruth's son Obed is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Ruth deserves to become part of the Jewish royal family, which will eventually produce the Messiah, and to be an eternal light for the Jewish people and the world. Ruth herself lived a long, fruitful life, even merited to see King Solomon, her great-great-grandchild, ascend the throne. And he put a throne next to his for the mother of the king. This is in Kings 12:19. Rabbi Eliezer said, for the mother of royalty. This is Ruth. Ruth and Shavuot. The book of Ruth is read on Shavuot, the holiday celebrating the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. We who were all present as a nation at Mount Sinai and experienced the revelation of God and became Jews by nature of the overwhelming force of that revelation, have much to learn from Ruth, who converted on her own, and whose whole life was dedicated to doing good for others. This story, the Megillah of Ruth, has no laws of purity or impurity, no transgressions, and no mitzvot or commandments. It's just to teach how much reward comes to those who act with loving kindness. The holiday of Shavuot is also the birthday of King David, as well as the day of his death. Why do we read the book of Ruth on Shavuot? This book is full of Hesed, and the Torah is all Hesed, loving kindness, as it says. The Torah of Hesed on her lips and was given on Shavuot. And I have a personal postscript. At my conversion, I chose as my Hebrew name, Ruth Laron. I have a question. Does anyone in your tradition have a tradition of any kind of name change or something like that? You can answer a different question if you want.
Well, the Catholics will take a name for confirmation. They'll add a name. They don't change a name.
Right.
And mine doesn't add a name as well.
I have a perspective I want to share.
Yes.
In the way the Christians organize our what we call the Old Testament, Ruth comes right after Judges because it begins in the days when the judges judged. But in the Jewish sequencing of their scripture, Ruth comes right after the book of Proverbs, and Proverbs ends with the hymn of praise to the Eshet Hayil, the ideal woman. And so right after that, those 20 or so verses describing the ideal woman, there's this 4-chapter novella of Ruth, who's kind of the embodiment of that very idea. And it's something that it just eludes Christians because of the sequencing of the scripture. And if my Hebrew professor hadn't pointed that out to me, I would never have known that as well. But I think that it adds some depth to the understanding that we bring to Ruth.
Tom, that's excellent. And is that called the woman of valor, what you're talking about?
Yeah, I've always, it's sometimes you see the Hebrew phrase dedicated, an author will dedicate the book to, this Eshet Hayil is how I pronounce it from my days in seminary. I'm sure it gets rendered a lot of different ways into English.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I think it adds meaning to the whole thing. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, sorry. Does anyone else have anything else?
I just wanted to, hearing about Ruth, I'm ignorant to these things. I didn't know, and then also the fact that she was, Solomon was her, she was her grandchild, and it's really, thank you, Lee. I've learned so much, and then it keeps reminding me of, with her sacrifice and her dedication to her family. The only person that I can think of that it really reminds me is the prophet's wife, Khadijah, may God be pleased with her, and how also she was a widow as well. And there's a lot of similarities, and she was the first woman to convert to Islam. And she was also a businesswoman, and she was a wealthy woman, and she sacrificed towards the end of her life. She sacrificed all her money to help the Muslims, and because at some point they were exiled and they were boycotted, and so that is in her dedication to the Prophet. They were married for 25 years, and she was the only woman who had children with him, who survived. And it's just amazing the similarities that I keep hearing between these two women. And Khadija is a revered woman, and she was well ahead of her time, and trailblazing, being a businesswoman who was a widow. And then she married the Prophet. She was his first wife, and he was 25 years old, and she dedicated her life to him. And she was the first woman to convert to Islam. And
okay, so Hope and Jeremy, we need a future on the Prophet's wife, because she's fascinating to me. I want to know more. So
yeah, it's a very fascinating story.
It's so exciting to hear each other's stories and to compare, to interrupt them, to ask you of any similarities in your faith. And I appreciate that so much. I feel I've learned a lot today myself, and it's extremely meaningful. And I thank you all for coming.
I just add that I think that it's important to point out the analogy to Mary in Christianity. I mean, here you have a woman who's a risk taker too. I mean, she obeys, she takes a great risk. And, there's a great analogy. I think you've got a wealth of comparison there for a whole new course on that. But, this whole idea, the whole theme of the submissive, obedient woman, we can carry that all the way through religion for good reasons and for bad reasons. I mean, we can mine this for a great deal of richness in the obedience, and then we can also see things that may have been spun on that may not have always inured to the benefit of women. But certainly we do find in, I think, most religions, certainly the three great Abrahamic faiths, these women who have such a faith, they submit. And I think it's this enormous trust they place in the words of others, and then God rewards them for that.
You're helping me see the strength in that concept of submission, that it can be carried around to our different traditions. And I could see a book coming comparing these stories.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there've been a few, I think. There's lots of work here to mine. There's lots of work to do.
Wonderful.
But I want to thank everybody for coming and lending their voice to the program. It's I think this has been a very meaningful one. If you have any further comments or things to add, please feel free to email myself or Lee. We would love to continue the conversation. And do keep an eye out for the next couple iterations of this program. And if you haven't taken the survey, I would love for you to take the survey. But we'll be sending out the recording and a link to the survey to everybody who registered. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Lee.
Shalom.
Lee, you were wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you,
very
Jeremy.
much.
Thank you.
Hi, Carrie.
Bye.